Maplewood, a picturesque Midwestern town, was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone. With its tree-lined streets, white-clapboard houses, and community picnics, it seemed untouched by the chaos of the outside world. Residents prided themselves on their closeness. Neighbors helped raise one another's children. Churches were full every Sunday, and crime was nearly non-existent. But within this seemingly wholesome community, there was one presence that loomed larger than most: Elias Crane. To the townspeople, Elias was a man of remarkable calm and wisdom. In the late 1990s, he had founded the Shepherd's Light, a religious fellowship that quickly gained influence. At its peak, nearly a quarter of Maplewood's families were affiliated with it. Elias was not only their spiritual guide. He was the counselor they turned to in moments of crisis, the mediator in disputes, and the charismatic preacher whose sermons could quiet a room with a single sentence. Outsiders thought the Shepherd's Light was just another small-town church, but to members, it was a way of life. Elias demanded loyalty, obedience, and a willingness to sacrifice worldly pleasures for spiritual purity. To the community, however, Elias remained an admired figure, a man beyond suspicion. That all changed in the summer of 2015, when Maplewood was shaken by two brutal murders that pulled back the curtain on the darkest secret the town had ever known. On July 18, 2015, a jogger discovered the body of Hannah Lewis, a 24-year-old lifelong resident of Maplewood. She was found just off a dirt trail on the edge of farmland, her wrists bound with rope, her body hastily covered with brush. Investigators arrived at the scene and were immediately disturbed by the brutality. Hannah had no known enemies, no history of risky behavior, no ties to criminal activity. To the sheriff's department, it looked like the work of a transient predator, an outsider who had struck at random. But Hannah wasn't just anyone. She had been a regular at the Shepherd's Light, where Elias Crane had personally counseled her through the grief of losing her father. Friends later revealed that Hannah had been questioning the group's teachings in the weeks before her death, telling one confidant that she was thinking of leaving. The initial investigation went cold. No fingerprints, no murder weapon, no clear suspect. Then, just 2 months later, another body was discovered. Daniel Ortiz, a 31-year-old Maplewood man, was found dead in his car, parked in an abandoned cornfield. Cause of death: blunt force trauma. Daniel had once been a devoted member of Elias Crane's fellowship, but he had left years earlier, warning others that Elias was manipulative and dangerous. 2 victims, both tied in some way to Elias Crane. To investigators, it was no longer possible to dismiss these killings as random. A chilling pattern was emerging. Detectives began digging deeper into the Shepherd's Light. On the surface, it appeared harmless: Bible studies, communal meals, Sunday services. But when investigators interviewed former members, a more disturbing picture emerged. Elias Crane, they said, ruled with an iron grip masked by his calm demeanor. Members were expected to confess their sins directly to him, often in private sessions. He encouraged families to cut off ties with outsiders, including relatives who weren't part of the fellowship. He controlled finances, dictated relationships, and even pressured some members into giving up their homes and possessions to serve the light. Former members described psychological manipulation, public shaming rituals, and threats of damnation for anyone who dared leave. Detectives began to see Hannah and Daniel's murders not as isolated tragedies, but as warnings. Both victims had either left the group or were planning to. But Elias was careful. He spoke with investigators openly, never losing his calm, and even offered his fellowship hall for prayer vigils for the victims. His community presence was so respected that some officers privately admitted they struggled to imagine him as a killer. The case dragged on, tensions mounting. Then, in October, Elias did something no one expected. On October 3, 2015, Elias Crane walked into the Maplewood Sheriff's office. He asked to speak with detectives. Dressed neatly in his gray suit, his posture composed, he sat across from the investigators and spoke with startling simplicity. "I killed them." The room went silent. Detectives thought he was joking, or perhaps confessing under some mental breakdown. But Elias continued, his voice calm, almost serene. "Hannah was wavering. She wanted to leave, and that kind of weakness spreads like disease. Daniel betrayed the light years ago. They were both chosen. Their sacrifice was necessary. He described how he had followed Hannah on the night of her death, lured her with promises of a private meeting, and taken her life in what he called a purification. For Daniel, Elias explained that he had stalked him for days before striking him down, ensuring the message was clear. No one defies the shepherd. When asked why he was confessing, Elias smiled faintly. The truth must be seen, he said. Light exposes darkness. For investigators, the motive was chillingly clear. Elias Crane wasn't just eliminating people. He believed he was carrying out divine justice. His victims were not random. They were chosen because they threatened his control. News of Elias Crane's confession tore Maplewood apart. For decades, he had been the town's spiritual anchor. He married their children, buried their dead, counseled them through heartbreak. Now, he stood exposed as a manipulative cult leader and self-proclaimed executioner. At trial, Elias remained eerily calm. He never denied the murders. Instead, he reframed them as sacrifices demanded by God. Prosecutors painted him as a narcissistic manipulator who used religion to dominate and destroy lives. Former fellowship members testified about years of psychological abuse, describing Elias as a man who played God in their lives, deciding who was worthy and who was damned. Their testimonies revealed that Hannah and Daniel were not his only targets of control. Others had suffered in silence, too afraid to leave. The jury deliberated for less than 2 days before convicting Elias on 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Even then, as he was led away in shackles, Elias turned to the cameras and said, "They'll understand one day. The light will prevail." The aftermath of Elias Crane's confession still lingers in Maplewood. Many residents struggle with shame. How could they have trusted him for so long? How could they have failed to see the warning signs? Families splintered, some still loyal to Elias, convinced he was a prophet unjustly imprisoned. Others denounce him as a monster who cloaked himself in scripture to mask his cruelty. For Hannah Lewis's family, the pain is compounded by betrayal. She went to him for guidance, her mother said tearfully at a vigil, and he took her life instead. Daniel Ortiz's relatives remain outspoken, urging others to learn from Maplewood's tragedy. Evil doesn't always come as a stranger. Sometimes it wears the face of someone you trust. The legacy of Elias Crane is one of duality. To some, he was once a shepherd. His confession shocked Maplewood not only because of its brutality, but because it forced the town to confront a truth they never wanted to believe. The danger wasn't outside their gates. It was leading them in prayer.